What is up, guys? Thanks for watching as always. In this video we'll be making fishing lures out of deer antler that will look something along the lines of this. And we'll be swimming like this. So let's get started. Hopefully you'll enjoy the video. Alrighty, so first of all, it's been a while since I've uploaded a video. I've been very busy. I'll keep that real short. A while back I was lucky enough to be invited onto a fishing and hunting trip in South Texas, an area called the King Range. We did a bit of hunting. We also did some red fishing, so I was lucky enough to catch my first red fish down there in South Texas. Awesome experience. And as a thank you, I'm making these lures for the people that invited me onto the trip, as well as the guide. Now the unique thing about this is these lures will be made from deer antler sheds that I found over in the King Range. There's a lot of deer, very big deer there in South Texas, so I thought it was a great opportunity to take some new material home and try and make lures out of them. I believe it's worked exceptionally well, even though it was a very tedious process. So let's just get going from the start. I'll start off with how I'm cutting up the antler and how we're shaping them into these awesome lures. Thanks again for watching. So first things first, obviously we gotta cut up the antler first. We've determined the sections that we need to cut. That makes life a lot easier and it gives a bit of an idea what we can use. You see the pieces right here, and then the lure design can begin. Once we've got some sort of a rough design on the actual antler, we'll cut the pieces into separate pieces that will actually make it more useful for actually making the lure. So here you see me use one of the bigger base parts of the antler to cut up and kind of shape slowly into one of the spoons. Now one of these big bases actually has enough material for me to make at least 2 big spoons out of. And if I cut them thin enough, I can actually make a third one out of there. But just to begin, I wanted to give myself a good amount of material to work with, because if I make an error, after all, it is the first time using this material, I want to be able to have enough material to kind of work along with that. So later on I did end up cutting 3 pieces out of one big base piece, but to start off, 2 pieces will work for now. So you already see that I've got, when I split it through half, obviously I've got one flat side and one rounded off side. So that's a perfect start for a spoon, because that way I can hollow out one section with the Dremel, the flat section it is, and the other round part I can just smooth out, and that way we've already got a rounded off bit right there. So you can already see kind of where the shape is going. Now one thing I wasn't surprised by the way, this material is exceptionally tough to work with. It is super tough, and it takes a long time to grind everything out. I think for every lure design that I had to smooth out, I had to recharge the battery of my Dremel like at least 4 times to get somewhat of a smooth surface on there. So needless to say, it took a long time to do. I think for every just rough grind out of the shape, it took me about 8 hours, which is a nightmare, but we eventually got there. Also, if you do end up doing this, and I don't know how many people will actually watch this and say, you know what, I'm going to make some lures out of antlers, the smell is not very pleasant once it heats up. Alright, so we started on the bigger spoon. Now we've kind of, I guess, carved out the outline. And I thought I had a brilliant idea by getting rid of the really rough edges, smoothing out one part of it and then leaving the rest kind of like rough, so you can still see that it was deer antler. I mean, one side looks fine, but then on the other side it looks something you don't want it to look like. So yeah, that's going to be a big no. Alrighty, so here I'm carving out a bit of a rougher shape. Some of the spots on the actual shape of the lure were a bit rough to smooth out. There's too much difference in the shape there, so I have to smooth it out by knife, get a bit of a better angle on it, Obviously we use some sandpaper as well to smooth out the rest, but that was all pretty straightforward. The longer process is done at this point. Tried to keep that as short as possible for you in the video. Now before we grind out the shape completely on the hollow side, I wanted to drill some holes. This is where the wire will go in. We just make some wire eyes ourselves that you'll see in the video a little bit later on, and they'll just be inserted with some super strong super glue. So yeah, that will work out well. You have to be careful how far you drill in and how thick the pieces are that you leave on the front and the back in order for the wire to sit in, because obviously you can go drill too far and it'll end up in the hollow section, which will leave a mark. So you'll have to be careful with that. Now here you'll see me with the lure that's already fairly smooth. I've kind of drawn a design on the front of the face, and again, very tough material, so you'll see me sharpen the knife a lot here, but those throwaway blades are not bad. You can actually sharpen them quite well. So we've got a bit of a rough outline on the face, and again, sanding is very important to get the lure to look decent. Now at this point I didn't really know how well the lure was going to look, and I was actually tempted to do some foiling on it, but as it turned out later, when you polish it up, it actually shows a really nice natural color. So in my opinion, painting and foiling is not really necessary. The grit that I'm using here is I believe 300, which is soft enough to give it a good polished edge. But it's still gritty enough to get rid of some of the little bumps on there, so it'll smooth that very nicely. If you go too light with this stuff, the sanding is going to take, well, again, hours and hours. That's looking pretty good already. So just to show you how the attachment eyes or guides, whatever you want to call them, are going to be attached. They're going to both work the same. So these are just some eyes that I've actually made out of wire myself. They're basically custom fit to whatever would allow us size wise to be drilled into the inside of the antler here. So we've made a little drill hole, as you saw in the previous section, and it's as simple as fitting that in there. Now this fits very snug, and obviously that's not the only way we're going to do it. We're also going to put some very good super glue in there. That way we'll make sure that it's definitely tied up, and we actually use some sawdust to harden that stuff up, so it's going to be like a concrete almost to fix that stuff in, which should be perfectly suitable for it. So I'll just tap this in. As you can see, that doesn't go very easy, so it's super snug. There we go. Make sure that it's centered. There we go. That's pretty damn good. I won't be able to physically pull this out right now, so let alone with super glue in there. That's super tight. So that is all said. Now you get a bit of an idea of how we do it. Alrighty guys, so we're pretty much halfway through the process of actually turning these pieces of antler into lures. Now one is actually starting to take pretty good shape. We've been able to do some carving of the face. I might try and get more detail into there, but we'll see how we go with that, because it is exceptionally tough to do. Just grinding it out, to give you an idea, just grinding this shape out took me about 8 hours in total. And then I had to do the carving on top of that, which was a nightmare. The bone of the antler is very thick, very tough to work with, but the result is quite nice. It's sanded and all right now, so I'll give you a good look as to what it looks like right now. Again, it's in good shape right there. Now I will say the benefit of making these lures is actually that you can only really carve one side anyway, because the other side is going to be hollow. So that does kind of save us some time, otherwise it'd be near impossible to do. But quite happy with how this is turning out. We've got some more pieces to work with, so I'm already starting on a second one. I've polished this one up a little bit with some polish, some clear polish, and that gave me some time to start working on the second one. This one's not quite there, as you can see, but it's getting pretty damn close. We will use this piece of base antler to cut out another 2 bodies so we can make some spintail lures. Hopefully that will work out well. And we'll make a bigger spoon lure out of this one. So that actually came off the other piece of the base, which was fitted together like so. Oops. So that was the base of the antler, as you can see. So we've sawed that one off and already kind of drew a design on there how we want it to look. So progress is going okay. It's kind of slow, but you know, it's a unique material to work with. I don't want to rush this and kind of ruin really nice material that is not easy to find, except for if you're on the King Range. There's plenty of it over there, but I don't want to rush this. I want to make sure it's working perfectly. Another difficult thing to work with working with this material is the fact that it's already a sinking material, so balancing it out is actually going to be really tough. We don't want any drill holes in there other than the insert holes for the wire, simply because it's going to show in the design, and because there's quite nice marbling once you polish this stuff up. It'd be a waste to just drill the holes in there and try and balance it out in a certain way. So we really have to focus on how we're going to design these in order for them to work well. We don't just want them to be cool lures because they're made out of deer antler, or that they've been carved in a certain way that makes them look really cool. We also want them to work, so yeah, we're kind of fighting everything at the same time. But hopefully we'll get it done. Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually add some detail to the gill plates right here. You can see. We're going to do that in a pretty simple way. I've just got this pretty sharp nail here. It's got quite a fine point and a little hammer or whatever you can use that allows you to hit the nail. It doesn't have to be like anything special in particular. We're going to add some detailing here on the gill covers. So if you look at a lot of the high-end Japanese lures, a lot of them have got a very fine scale pattern on the gill covers, and quite often the way they do is they make these small indents in the gill plates. So that's what we're actually going to do right now as well. So we'll see how we go. Now it doesn't have to be super precise. If it's just random, it means that it's not super detailed as to the spacing in between them, but it actually gives it a more natural look rather than being exactly, say, 0.5 millimeter apart or something like that. So we're just gonna fill this one up as we can. I'll probably should start with the outer edges because that kind of allows us to make use of the surface of the gill plate a little bit better. So let's have a look here. I don't know if you can make that out very well, but it looks pretty cool. We will be sanding and polishing it afterwards, and that should be able to give a good detail in the bone. So let's keep at it and see how we go. So obviously it's worth paying attention to what you're doing. This, even though the material is quite tough, it's also quite brittle, so you have to be careful with how hard you hit it and the location that you hit it. You hit it too far on the edge of the lure and it will definitely actually break open. It's too brittle, so be careful with that. So right now we've got some detail here in the first gill plate right here. Now it's looking a bit rough, but once we sand it, it should clear up a little bit, and then once it's polished, it should look really natural. So we'll just keep going on with the other plate as well. Hopefully it will work out. Alrighty, so now that we're done with that, you can see I filled in the dots with some green ink there. But right now it's time to polish it. I want to smooth everything out. So we want to make sure that it doesn't look too bad. And what we're actually going to polish it with this time is just some clear nail polish remover. This stuff dries fairly quick, and it actually seeps into the grain of the antler very well. It's, you know, nail and ivory and antler, they're all somewhat similar in structure, I guess. So this seems to work quite well. So we'll just apply a little bit of that, and we'll just have to let that sit. And after that, we'll sand it, we'll apply some more. Kind of go from there. Now, one thing I will say, I really should have waited for putting the eye on before I started making the detail, but it was kind of like a last minute idea. So, but in case you are on the same endeavor as I was with creating some detail in the bone, or in the antler for that matter, you probably want to wait with putting the eyes on to the last moment, right before you start putting the coat on. So this looks alright. We'll just polish over the eye as well, so that there's a bit of a coat over it to protect it. Nothing wrong with that. Alrighty, so that's looking fairly good for now. We're going to have to sand this a little bit. Get rid of the excess, but we'll just let this sit for now. Alrighty, so the polish is actually hardened up fairly well. We've sanded it a little bit. I didn't want to waste any time and kind of get started on the scale carving on the side, so I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but I've already got some scale carving cuts here in the side. I've done the lateral line here, which still looks a little bit rough, but I'll clear that up. And there's some scale cuts on the head. It's still very light. Now the problem is, the moment I make a cut, I cannot recover it. I can sand over it if I want to, but it's going to be very difficult to repair it, so to speak, because I'm cutting directly into the bone, or the antler for that matter. So I have to be very careful. What I have noticed is that if you want to do this very accurately, I don't know if you can see this here, these are very well aligned right here. Those are the ones that I started off with, and it's done by not cutting forward but actually cutting backwards. You get a much better idea of where you're going, where the touch point from the knife cut starts, so you see what you're actually cutting properly. So I actually start here and then drag it back that way, and if I'd make a full cut, I'd start all the way here and then cut it back that way. That way I can make parallel lines. As long as they're parallel and they're spaced out evenly, you'll be gold. So we'll continue on with that, and after that's done, we'll continue on with another polish coat, sand it, polish it again, and continue on from there. So knife wise, it doesn't really matter a whole lot what you use. Right now I've literally got like a multi-tool. This knife is fairly sharp. It's at least sharp enough to do the trick. And I'll kind of show you if I can see what I'm doing here. So the last cut that I made is right here, so I'm going towards the front right now. I'm gonna have to space it out, and at all times I'm going to have to look as to where the last cut was so that I can run parallel to it. It's a little bit tricky. Well, it's very tricky, let's put it that way, but here's about the right spacing. There we go. That's pretty decent, and we'll continue on from there. So I probably will make secondary cuts in there just to make sure it made all the way through and it's actually a cut, not just a scratch, because there is some polish on there already. We're going to have to be very precise with this. This is going to take a while. That's one. Alrighty, so we've just finished up the head with the cross cut. And this should be able to give you a bit of an idea what it's going to look like. So that doesn't look too bad. Mind you, I've been at it for 45 minutes, so we've got another probably 2 hours to go. Lots of fun. This is probably the worst thing to do, but the results fantastic, so we'll keep at it. Alrighty, so after some excruciatingly long carving session, we finally got the pattern done. I don't know if you can, I hope it'll be easy to see, but the pattern's in there. It looks really good. I like the result of it. Now we're going to put some more polish over it because it's kind of rough right now. Hopefully that pattern will remain in there because that polish does seep into the grain quite well, and that might actually result in the pattern fading, so I hope that doesn't happen, but we'll see how that goes. But at least we'll get some texture on it, so quite happy with how that's turned out. Especially on the head right here. I did reduce the scale size over here because naturally the smaller scales are on the front of the head and they increase as they go towards the middle of the body and then decrease again, but that looks pretty damn good. Now you could also use epoxy, regular epoxy, but it makes it a little bit harder to use. Obviously a two-tone epoxy, a clear one like Envirotex, would be much more suitable for durability. However, it makes it a lot harder to work with when it comes to doing this type of stuff, when you want to just apply a really thin coat, because right now I can just open up the jar and just use whatever I need to. With epoxy you're going to have to measure everything out, you don't know how much you need to use, so it's going to be much more difficult. Plus the drying time is a lot longer, at least on Envirotex I know, so this will work for now. Alrighty. Apply some more. Alrighty, well there you have it. That's looking pretty damn good. I'm very happy with the result, and as you see, that polish has really brought out the marbling in the bone, or the antler, whatever you want to call it. It does fade the scale cuts slightly, but the end result is perfectly good. You can still see all the scales, so that's awesome. Very happy. Hopefully the people that will be receiving this as a gift will be happy with it as well, so fingers crossed on that one. I think I'll be fine. So obviously we're not done with this video until we get a final pull test. Now I did obviously test the lure before I decided to finish it off, because there's no point in making a nice looking lure that doesn't swim good, especially if you give it to somebody else. You can have it as like an ornamental piece, I guess, but especially if I give it away, I really want to make sure it swims well. So the idea behind this lure is really mainly redfish. As most of you know, redfish do like spoon lures, spoon style lures, among a wide variety of others though. But and actually the cool thing that was really helpful with the bone that we were using is that it's a slow sinking material naturally. Now the problem with most spoons on the market is that they're a fast sinking because they're made out of metal, and a lot of the fishing that's done in Baffin Bay is wade fishing, which happens in fairly shallow water. With this bone material that's slow sinking, it allows for a super slow retrieve, and the lure will still kick quite well. It won't just sink straight to the bottom like a brick, and it won't drag to the mud too bad, even though that sometimes isn't too bad of a thing to happen, because redfish do like picking up baits from the bottom. This allows you to fish it super slow, which is a fantastic feature to have in a lure for redfish. So as you can see, it wiggles really nicely, it doesn't sink super fast, and it looks great too. So thanks for watching as always, guys. I really appreciate it. If you can, please do subscribe if you like this video, and maybe my other videos as well. And we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.